What you're about to hear was never meant to be known. For over 150 years, the truth about the Anthony family was buried, not just by time, but by design. A hidden community, a bloodline bound to darkness, rituals older than America, and a family so powerful they almost got away with it. But tonight, we dig up what they tried to erase. Stay with me, because every minute we descend together, you'll see more than horror. You'll see how easy it is to fall under the spell of power, and why most never make it out. Watch until the end, because once the final secret is revealed, nothing will look the same again. Before we continue with the story of the Anthony family and their community that promised salvation but delivered only suffering, I need to know, are you one of the brave souls who can handle the darkest chapters of American history? This channel isn't for everyone, only for those who dare to uncover the truth that others fear to speak. If you're ready to join our brotherhood of mystery seekers, hit that subscribe button now and tell me in the comments what state you're listening from. Because what happened in Ohio could have happened anywhere in frontier America. Let's discover together what lurks beneath the surface of our nation's forgotten past. They were never meant to be found. That's what the deputy said in 1912, standing over the scorched ruins of what used to be the Anthony farmhouse. What he didn't know was that the bodies weren't burned. They were arranged. 14 of them. Eyes missing, tongues removed. A symbol carved into each chest that no one in Vinton County would speak of again. But the story doesn't begin there. No, it goes much deeper. Into a darkness older than this country itself. Older than the church that tried to contain it. This is not just a tale of murder or madness. This is about control. About how one family turned divine obedience into a doctrine of absolute dominion. If you think you know American history, prepare to be unmade. The story of the Anthony family was buried for a reason, because what they built was not a home, but a fortress of spiritual tyranny. And now, you're standing at the door. The year was 1821. The soil of southeastern Ohio had barely settled from the War of 1812, and the wilderness pulsed with promise. Men came seeking land, women sought safety, but the Anthonys brought something else entirely, something older, something hidden in their bloodline for generations. Jeremiah Anthony, a tall, spectral man with ink-black eyes and the quiet fury of a preacher, arrived in the shadow of Mount Airy with his pregnant wife and 3 sons. They bought land not from the government, but through an unrecorded transaction with a man who vanished 2 weeks later. Locals said the man was never seen again. Only his horses were found, skinned and hanging from the trees. Jeremiah claimed he had received a vision from the true shepherd, a voice that instructed him to build a place of cleansing on land once used for native burials. They called it Anthony Hollow, but the indigenous tribes had another name, Ashtaluk, which roughly translates to the place where the breath ends. Jeremiah ignored the warnings. He didn't build a church, he built an altar. The Anthony homestead was no ordinary structure. It was constructed with precision, facing directly east to catch the first light of dawn. Beneath it, a network of limestone catacombs was carved out with 7 chambers, each representing the 7 sins that Jeremiah swore to purge from his bloodline. He believed the soul was not cleansed by prayer, but by punishment. Every Sunday, the family gathered not to worship, but to confess and to suffer. Jeremiah's doctrine, the doctrine of removal, dictated that every impurity must be cut away, physically if needed. He taught his sons to fast for 7 days without water, to sleep on beds of stone, and to recite scriptures until their voices gave out. One by one, his followers came. Not many, but enough. Men from broken towns, widows who had nowhere to go. He promised them clarity. He promised them rebirth. What they found was submission masked as salvation. And they brought their children. What makes a man follow a madman? It isn't fear, it's hope. Hope that someone finally has the answer, especially when life offers only chaos. By 1825, Anthony Hollow had 12 families living under Jeremiah's rule. They wore hand-woven tunics dyed in lamb's blood. They ate only from wooden bowls with no metal utensils, because Jeremiah believed iron attracted the watchers. Every hour of their day was regimented. At 3 a.m. they awoke. At 4 a.m. they confessed. At 5, labor began, without speaking. Only Jeremiah's voice was allowed to echo in the hollow. Children were forbidden to speak until the age of 10. The community built underground rooms for reflection, where people would be sealed for days, alone, with only a candle and a handwritten verse to read. If the candle burned out before they emerged, they were declared impure. Some never came back out. Jeremiah told the others they had been taken home, but what they didn't know is that he kept their hair and teeth. By the winter of 1829, 3 children had disappeared. 2 mothers were found dead in the river, their bodies bound in linen and marked with the symbol of the cleansing eye. Rumors reached the neighboring towns, but no one dared investigate. Jeremiah had a gift, a cold charisma that could disarm even the most hardened of skeptics. He called his followers the weaned. He said the world outside was still on the teat of sin, while his people had been cut free, made pure. One night, a man named Elias Carter, a blacksmith from Chillicothe, came with a warrant. He never made it back. His horse returned without him, soaked in blood and missing its eyes. The sheriff declared the area too remote to patrol. Jeremiah tightened his grip. Every member of the hollow was branded, with a symbol etched just above the spine. He claimed it protected them from demons. In truth, it marked them as his property. Let me ask you something. What would you do to be saved? Would you give up your name, your will, your children? Because that's what the Anthonys required. In 1830, the blood offering ritual was introduced. Once a year during the spring equinox, the youngest child of each family was brought to the altar Jeremiah built from bones and shale. Their wrists were pricked and their blood was poured into the hollowed skull of a deer. No one died, yet. But the psychological fracture was complete. Children learned that pain was love, that suffering was holy, that silence was salvation. The lines between devotion and obedience vanished. And so, when Jeremiah's second son, Caleb Anthony, was accused of strangling a 3-year-old girl in 1831, the community didn't recoil. They fasted, they prayed, and then they celebrated. Because the true shepherd, Jeremiah said, had tested their faith, and they had passed. Pause, breathe. This is where most people turn back, but not you. You're not like the others, are you? You've come too far to look away now. In fact, if you're truly ready to transform into something stronger than the lies they fed us, I want you to type this in the comments right now. I see through the veil. I see through the veil. Do it twice. Lock it in. Let the algorithm know you're no longer asleep. By 1832, Anthony Hollow had become its own isolated kingdom, self-sustaining, self-policing, and sealed from the world. The outside no longer mattered. Jeremiah controlled everything: the land, the food, the doctrine, and the punishments. Those who disobeyed vanished, but what the families didn't know was that something darker was taking root, something that stretched beyond Jeremiah's twisted theology. It started with dreams, violent, vivid dreams shared by multiple members. They spoke of a shadow calf, a creature with burning eyes, and a voice that sounded like wind through bones. Jeremiah claimed these dreams were sacred. He said they came from the Hollow One, a divine being older than God who had been buried beneath their feet. He introduced new prayers, written in a language no one recognized. He began holding services in the catacombs. The altar, once symbolic, now drank real blood. At first it was animals, then miscarried children, then something worse. Rebecca Templeton was the first outsider to survive the Hollow. She arrived in 1833, a school teacher from Portsmouth who believed she was coming to join a peaceful Christian commune. What she found instead was a cult locked in ritualistic obedience to a man they called the Last Shepherd. She stayed 2 weeks. In that time, she witnessed a woman beaten for speaking out of turn, children whipped for smiling, and a midnight ceremony in which Jeremiah carved a symbol into the chest of a newborn with a blade made from human rib. Rebecca escaped under the cover of fog and frost. She staggered 20 miles to the next county with frostbitten feet and a story no one believed. She was called hysterical, delusional, a drunk. Her testimony vanished in an archived report buried by the county clerk, but her journal survived. In it she wrote, "There is no God in Anthony Hollow, only a man with the devil beneath his tongue. The Hollow One." That was the name whispered beneath breath now. It had replaced God in their vocabulary, though they never admitted it openly. Jeremiah's sermons grew stranger. He spoke of time as a cycle, not a line. He said the world had burned once before, and that they were living inside its ashes. He claimed their bloodline would survive the next great fire, but only if they were loyal, completely. That year he introduced the veil trials. A member would be chosen at random, blindfolded and led into the woods. If they returned by dawn, they were declared pure. If they didn't, their names were never spoken again. By 1835, 19 people had failed the trial. None were seen again. Some said they were sacrificed. Others claimed they joined the watchers in the trees. But what terrified the people most was this: every person who returned from the veil trial returned changed. Their eyes were empty. Their smiles didn't reach their face. There's something you need to understand now. Jeremiah Anthony didn't just believe in obedience, he believed in transformation. He wasn't building a religion, he was forging a new species, one without weakness, mercy, or doubt. He taught his sons to read Latin, Aramaic, and an unknown script found on the walls of a cave beneath their land. He claimed it was older than Scripture, that it had been revealed to him by the Hollow One after a 21-day fast. He showed his family how to write it in ash and blood, and soon symbols began to appear on every door in the hollow. People said they glowed at night. The children stopped crying. The animals grew aggressive. Even the land began to change. Fruit rotted on the vine, and the river turned a shade darker. But still, no one left, because by then, leaving meant death, not from Jeremiah, but from something worse, something that moved through the woods after sundown, mimicking voices of the dead. By 1836, the hollow no longer resembled any place on earth. The families who once came for peace now moved like ghosts, silent, hollow-eyed, stripped of self. No laughter, no warmth. Even the children walked with their heads down, reciting phrases in the old tongue, muttering incantations in place of nursery rhymes. Jeremiah had succeeded. He had broken them. Every trace of individuality was erased. But the price was unimaginable. That spring, 7 women gave birth on the same night. Not one child cried. Each was born with a strange deformity, black eyes, webbed fingers, and in one case, no tongue. Jeremiah declared it a divine blessing. He claimed the Hollow One had finally begun to touch the womb. Mothers were forbidden to grieve. Instead, they fasted for 40 days and wore red robes soaked in goat's blood. The infants were kept beneath the main house, where only Jeremiah and his firstborn, Elias, were allowed to see them. Some said they could hear cooing at night. Others said they heard chanting. The outsiders began to notice. Farmers from neighboring ridges reported that their livestock went missing, found days later with symbols carved into their hides. Local hunters spoke of strange figures moving between trees at night, whispering in unison, never blinking. In one chilling account, a pastor from nearby Gallipolis described seeing a procession of hooded figures walking barefoot through the snow, leaving no tracks. He followed them to the edge of the hollow. What he saw made him drop his Bible and flee. He claimed the Anthony altar was glowing, that the trees were bent inward, as if pulled by something beneath the soil. He tried to report it. Days later, he was found dead in his study, every page of his Bible torn out and arranged in the shape of the Hollow One's symbol. The town chalked it up to madness. But the sheriff who found him, he quit that same day and left Ohio forever. His final words, "I looked into its eyes." Inside the hollow, the transformation continued. Jeremiah introduced a new rite, the naming. Every member was stripped of their birth name and given a new one based on what he called their use in the coming harvest. Men became shields, blades, or tongues. Women were named vessels, ashes, or keys. No one dared object. Identity was now property, assigned, not chosen. And what of the Anthony children? They had become shadows of their father. Elias, now 23, had not spoken a natural word in years. He communicated only in the ancient tongue, his body covered in scars from self-flagellation. He was said to bleed without pain. Jeremiah called him the mirror. The second son, Abram, had grown obsessed with embalming animals. He kept a collection of mummified birds and cats beneath his room. And then there was Miriam, the youngest, whose singing was said to cause nosebleeds and seizures in those who heard it too long. She never opened her eyes, and yet she never missed a step. But even within the hollow, cracks began to form. In 1837, something changed. A drought struck the region and the crops withered. The river slowed to a trickle, and the voices in the woods stopped. Jeremiah became erratic. His sermons lost coherence. He wept openly during services, claiming the Hollow One had turned its face from him. He demanded greater sacrifice. That summer, a child named Jonah Key, only 7 years old, was brought to the altar and never returned. The community was told he had ascended, but his mother, Ruth, went mad. She wandered the fields, screaming his name until her vocal cords tore. 2 nights later, she was found in the catacombs, her body posed in prayer, her eyes gouged out. Jeremiah called it a warning. "The Hollow One does not accept weakness," he thundered. "Let this be a lesson to all. Only the sharpened will survive the final fire." Fear became doctrine, doubt became treason, and still no one left. Now listen closely, because this is where the veil thins and the truth claws its way through the shadows. The Anthony family was no ordinary cult. They were the last living bloodline of an ancient secret, a pact forged centuries before America was born. Jeremiah's ancestors had once served a clandestine order known as the Veiled Synod, a shadow council that believed true power could only be wielded by those who sacrificed their humanity. This was no folklore. Scrolls discovered much later, hidden beneath the old hollow altar, revealed rituals older than Christianity itself. These rites promised dominion over life, death, and even the soul itself. Jeremiah's Hollow One was not a deity but a cipher, a key to unlocking a dormant force in bloodlines that carried a curse and a gift. The Anthony family's twisted dominion was their way to awaken this force, bending flesh and spirit to their will. The people trapped in Anthony Hollow were pawns in an arcane game far beyond their understanding. You're probably asking, how did they keep this hidden for so long? The answer is manipulation on a scale most men can barely comprehend. Jeremiah and his sons mastered psychological warfare long before psychology existed. They wielded isolation like a blade, severing ties to the outside world. Letters were censored, visitors were monitored, and those who resisted were quietly removed. The Hollow was a self-contained prison, but one disguised as salvation. Inside, fear was constant but subtle, silent punishments, whispered threats, the slow erosion of will. Jeremiah's sermons were coded commands, implanted into minds vulnerable from exhaustion and starvation. Members became addicted to his approval, craving the fleeting praise like a drug. This was mind control dressed as faith, and because the community believed they were chosen, their captivity felt like freedom. But it didn't stop there. The Anthony family understood that true control requires more than fear. It requires a mythology. They created legends about the Hollow One that blurred the lines between truth and fiction, feeding their followers stories of angels and demons, purifying fire and eternal night. These tales weren't just stories. They were tools designed to keep the community trapped in a loop of reverence and terror. When someone began to doubt, they were reminded that questioning the Hollow One was questioning reality itself. It was a cage built not from bars, but from belief, and belief is far harder to break. Even when bodies started piling up, even when the children vanished, the myth held firm. Because in the end, the Anthony family knew the darkest prisons are those we build in our own minds. The peak of this dark reign came in 1840, when Jeremiah's grip reached its most brutal height. That year, he introduced the Harvest of Shadows, a yearly ritual where families were forced to offer up their sick, their weak, and sometimes their own children. Those chosen were led to the altar in the dead of night, their screams muffled by the dense forest. The community was told these sacrifices fed the Hollow One, ensuring prosperity for the rest. And for a time it seemed true. The crops flourished, the river ran clear, and the animals multiplied. But the price was written in the eyes of the survivors, a hollow stare that no prayer could fill. Jeremiah's own children became executioners, cold and unfeeling. Elias oversaw the selection, his hands never trembling. Abram prepared the bodies, chanting as he worked. Miriam watched silently, a spectral presence. The hollow had become a machine, feeding itself on pain and silence. By 1845, rumors began leaking beyond the dense forests and hills. Travelers spoke in hushed tones of a cursed land where the trees whispered secrets and the air tasted of blood. The Anthony Hollow had become a place no sane person dared approach. Occasionally, a desperate soul would disappear into the woods, never to be seen again. Some said the Hollow One claimed them. Others whispered of the Anthony family's hidden tunnels, labyrinths beneath the earth where unimaginable horrors unfolded. Official inquiries were blocked by powerful allies the Anthony family had cultivated in state politics and law enforcement. Money and blackmail ensured silence. What was once a hidden horror had become a sealed conspiracy, buried beneath layers of fear, corruption, and the unyielding power of blood. This is where the story takes a darker turn, a turn most never want to acknowledge, but that we must confront if we are to grasp the full scope of the Anthony family's terror. In 1847, a devastating fire consumed part of the Hollow's outer buildings. The community was shattered, but the Anthony family survived untouched. What remained revealed a chilling secret. Hidden beneath the ashes were dozens of charred bones, animal and human, arranged in ritualistic patterns. Worse still, a hidden chamber was discovered, carved deep into the bedrock, filled with cryptic symbols and ancient relics. This wasn't just a place of spiritual control, it was a stronghold of occult power. Jeremiah's followers whispered of a black flame burning beneath the earth, feeding the Hollow One's hunger. That same year, reports surfaced of strange lights flickering in the forest at night and disembodied voices calling names no one dared speak aloud. The Hollow was bleeding into the world outside, but no one knew how to stop it. By now, the physical and psychological decay within the Hollow was evident to anyone who dared to look. The community was a shell of its former self, ruled by paranoia and superstition. Jeremiah's rule had become tyrannical, his voice a command that demanded unquestioning obedience. Any hint of dissent was crushed with ruthless efficiency. Punishments escalated from isolation to torture, and finally to ritual execution. But the most sinister transformation was happening inside Jeremiah himself. Letters and journals uncovered years later described a man consumed by madness and visions, claiming to speak directly with the Hollow One, receiving instructions on how to bring about a cleansing fire that would reset the world's corrupt order. He believed himself a prophet, a harbinger of a new era born from chaos and bloodshed. And his family? They were his apostles, ready to carry out his unholy will. Around this time, a small band of rebels formed inside the Hollow, families desperate to escape the nightmare. They communicated in secret, using coded messages hidden in the lyrics of hymns sung during services. They planned a mass exodus, risking everything for a chance at freedom. But the Anthony family's spies were always watching. On the night of their escape, betrayal sealed their fate. The rebel leader, a man named Silas Wells, was captured, tortured, and executed publicly. His death was meant to serve as a warning, but instead it sparked a spark of resistance. The Hollow had cracks, and those cracks grew wider. Rumors of rebellion spread among the oppressed, whispers that one day the Hollow would fall. Yet Jeremiah's grip remained unbroken, fueled by fear and fanaticism. The years that followed were marked by increasing brutality and desperation. The Hollow's population dwindled due to disease, starvation, and ritual sacrifices. But Jeremiah's resolve only hardened. In 1850, the Anthony family executed a gruesome purge, removing anyone deemed weak or impure. Survivors were forced into even harsher conditions, their bodies and spirits broken beyond repair. Yet, amidst the darkness, something unexpected happened. A young woman named Naomi, born into the Hollow but untouched by its corruption, began to question everything. She listened to forbidden stories from the few elders who remembered the land's true history and dared to dream of escape. Naomi became a symbol of hope, a flicker of light in an endless night. But hope in Anthony Hollow was dangerous. Naomi's awakening was a spark that ignited hidden fires within the Hollow's desolate hearts. She began secretly teaching the children forgotten truths, stories of freedom, of a world beyond the forest's suffocating grasp. But her courage painted a target on her back. Jeremiah's children, now ruthless enforcers of their father's dark will, saw her as a threat that needed to be extinguished. Late one night, under a blood-red moon, Naomi disappeared. Some whispered she was captured and dragged into the catacombs beneath the main house. Others claimed she vanished into the woods, swallowed whole by the hollow's malevolent spirit. Yet her voice lived on in secret hymns and whispered prayers. The hollow had not yet silenced its last flicker of rebellion, but Naomi's fate marked the beginning of the end for Jeremiah's dominion, because even the darkest prisons can crumble from within. Around this time, whispers of the outside world began seeping into the hollow again. The growing railroad network encroached on the edges of the forest, bringing news, travelers, and suspicion. Journalists and officials, curious about the strange disappearances and eerie tales, began probing. They found roads blocked by hidden barricades and locals terrified to speak of the hollow. Yet a breakthrough came in 1853, when a government inspector managed to secure passage inside under false pretenses. What he witnessed was a scene out of a nightmare. Emaciated villagers slaving in the fields, children mute and fearful, and the Anthony family living in opulence amid the decay. His reports were buried, his findings labeled unverified, and he was reassigned quietly. But the truth had been seen, and once seen, it can never be unseen. The hollow's descent into chaos accelerated. Jeremiah's influence waned, replaced by paranoia and delusions of grandeur. He began to claim visions of the final reckoning, promising his followers that the Hollow One would rise in a fiery apocalypse that only they would survive. To prepare, he instituted brutal training regimes, body and soul forged in pain and ritual. He preached that suffering was the crucible of transformation, and those who broke were cast into the catacombs as offerings. Yet, beneath this fanaticism lay a deeper terror. Jeremiah knew his own time was running out. The dark force he had pledged his bloodline to demanded a sacrifice greater than any before. The family's twisted legacy was approaching its breaking point. This is where you must understand. The Anthony Hollow story is not just a tale of madness and murder. It is a mirror held up to the darkest parts of human nature. Our capacity for blind obedience, for corruption disguised as faith, and for the manipulation of truth. It exposes the machinery of control that powers every cult, every conspiracy, and every hidden agenda throughout history. Jeremiah Anthony's reign was a brutal experiment in power. How far a man could bend minds and souls, how deeply fear could be etched into flesh. And here's the truth no one wants to admit. That same machinery still runs today, in governments, corporations, even families. The Hollow lives on, in the shadows of power, in the lies whispered in halls of influence. The final years of the Anthony Hollow were a slow unraveling of humanity itself. By 1855, the community was a ghost town disguised as a village. The fields lay fallow, the cabins rotted, and the survivors moved like shadows, broken in body and spirit. Jeremiah, now a gaunt figure hollowed by years of fanaticism and despair, retreated deeper into the catacombs beneath the main house. It was said he spent days chanting in the ancient tongue, calling to the Hollow One for deliverance or damnation. Meanwhile, the Anthony children grew more monstrous in their devotion. Elias the mirror no longer spoke at all, only staring at his reflection for hours, whispering the cryptic script Jeremiah had taught him. Abram's embalming obsession turned into a macabre workshop of death, his chambers filled with grotesque specimens preserved in jars. And Miriam, the silent siren, was never seen outside the main house, but at night her wailing could be heard echoing through the trees, part lament, part curse. In 1857, a group of local militia, spurred by rumors and whispered confessions from escaped members, attempted a raid on Anthony Hollow. What they found was a place frozen in time and terror. The militia described an oppressive silence that pressed against their skin like cold water, and shadows that seemed to twist and watch from every corner. They uncovered the hidden chambers and found evidence of unspeakable rituals, bones stacked in altars, and relics pulsing with an unnatural energy. But when they confronted Jeremiah, he was nowhere to be found. Instead, they discovered a cryptic message scrawled on the wall in blood-red ash. The hollow consumes, the hollow endures. The militia fled, many haunted by visions of the Hollow One, their minds fractured by what they had witnessed. The collapse of the Anthony Hollow was not a battle won by armies or laws, but by time and silence. The survivors, few and scattered, carried with them stories too terrible to tell, memories too heavy to bear. The land itself rejected the darkness, reclaiming it with overgrowth and decay. Today, the site of Anthony Hollow is nothing more than a forgotten clearing in the Ohio woods, marked by broken stones and whispered warnings. But the truth lingers beneath the soil and in the shadows of the trees. The Anthony family's bloodline didn't end with Jeremiah's demise. Rumors persist that descendants live hidden among us, carrying the curse and the knowledge passed down through generations, waiting for the moment to awaken the Hollow once more. What can we learn from this? The Anthony Hollow is more than a dark chapter in history. It is a warning, a map of how power, when left unchecked and fed by fear, corrupts absolutely. It shows how easily faith can be twisted into chains, how the human soul can be fractured by lies dressed as salvation. But more than that, it calls on us to wake up, to question, to resist, and to reclaim our minds from those who would control them. Because the Hollow is not just in the past, it's a living force in every system built on manipulation and silence. It's the shadow lurking behind every lie you're told, every fear you're made to feel. The Hollow is real, and it is hungry. You've journeyed into a place few dare to enter, a descent into a truth that is as unsettling as it is necessary. Now the choice is yours. Will you walk away, returning to comfort and ignorance? Or will you carry this knowledge forward, armed with awareness and the courage to see beyond the veil? Remember this: power hides in darkness, but it cannot withstand the light of a man who refuses to be broken. The Anthony family's story is a reminder that evil thrives in silence, but truth, once spoken, is a weapon no shadow can withstand. Thank you for walking this path with me. Subscribe if you're ready to keep uncovering the hidden forces shaping our world. Until next time, stay vigilant. The Hollow watches, but it can't hold what refuses to be afraid. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon for coming stories.